Hello, today we shall study learning targets, and this is the continuation of the previous lessons with regards to learning targets. Learning targets should make it a lot easier for the teacher to become more disciplined and successful in instruction, concepts, and implementation. This method will encourage teachers to reflect on improving learning across lessons and units and students. At first, the technique can seem rigid, but the experience will soon yield smoothness as with any sort of procedural expertise. In some of the difficulties, the instructor or learning facilitator may encounter creating suitable learning goals. Learning goals are significant in a way that they can direct the teaching learning process into curriculum implementation, activity success, and outcome assessment. While there are plenty of rich target sources, providing a mechanism is a very difficult one. The problem is how to relate it to the learners in a learning condition background. Considering the challenges raised by selecting suitable learning goals, teachers should always resort to the list of skills provided by institutions for more natural judgment in selecting appropriate learning goals. This time, we shall discuss three types of learning targets. The first one is the learning target goal. Learning target goals or learning goal targets are descriptions of the awareness that students will show an understanding of a concept. These are explicitly taken from educational authorities that describe what students will learn and be trained to do by completing a degree or course. Specific expectations should include the detail required to establish objectives for regular or weekly learning that cover the subject emphasis, cognitive level of thought, and explicit language used to define learning goals. The next one is foundational targets. Foundational targets consist of knowledge and underlying procedures that build to the cognitive level of academic standard. They constitute the prerequisites that students need to master to achieve the learning goal targets ultimately. There are two types of foundational objectives. The first one is declarative knowledge. Declarative knowledge are goals define the academic vocabulary necessary for regular learning. Ask the following questions to identify the critical academic vocabulary to be targeted. The first one, do students need to know the word or phrase to demonstrate an understanding of the standard? The next question will be, having students learn this word or the concept in a prior degree or class? You need to ask those questions in order for you to determine the foundational targets. The third one is the cognitively complex targets. These targets are formed to help students cover and deepen the knowledge and skills of the standard. The expectations in these targets are more rigorous than the learning goal targets in a measure. This learning target category requires deeper logical thinking than the standard, necessitates and expects students to think about the same content in complex ways. Cognitively complex targets ask students to use the knowledge and skills of the rule to extend their creative thinking and make applications beyond what is outlined in the standard. So those are the three types of learning targets. Let us now proceed to competencies, objectives, and outcomes. These three words are very critical to the successful implementation of teaching, learning, and evaluation. The lack of solid understanding of the terms distinctions in the teacher's aspect will be tough to establish clear learning goals, and hence ambiguous on what to accomplish in the end. There has to be some confusion about what determines successful learning performance and how it is distinguished from learning objectives or abilities. Even in education research, the use of these terms sometimes appears incoherent. Finding meanings in the dictionary can sometimes be informative. Conferring to the American Heritage Dictionary, the learning terms are defined as follows. For competency or competence, it is the state or quality of being competent, suitably or well qualified, or can do. And for the objective, it work toward on striving for or a goal. And for the outcome, it refers to a natural result or consequence. The set of expectations that we need our learner who will be able to achieve are referred to as learning outcomes. It is their natural and mastered ability to gain all the required training in knowledge and skills enhancement in the future. Competencies are the collection of technical skills we needed to learn from our educational authorities based on a chosen field. On the other hand, either the student and the instructor must concentrate on the aims to achieve the skills. Competencies will be the foundation of the goals, and then objectives will be the tool for executing the proceed to produce desired results. Below is an illustration of an application of competencies, objectives, and outcomes derived from the website http://observatory.text.mx. Usually, the example given can be tested by competency-dependent assessment. Competence-based evaluation is the selection and assessment of evidence to decide if a person has achieved a degree of competency. The first and most straightforward way will be to analyze the learner's work. Typical working conditions make students very relaxed, and they demonstrate their job-related skills at convenience, even without usual stress that follows assessment. This helps observers to, at the same time as they can see, get precise and acceptable examples of behavior to be evaluated. What are then now the characteristics of objectives? SMART objectives are defined as established goals and objectives within the parameters that combine structure and flexibility. The SMART setting of targets provides a demonstrate setup towards a specific target with dependable objectives and an estimated timetable to attain the goals. SMART is an acronym for the specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-based. Specific, it states exactly what you want to accomplish. Who, what, where, why. Measurable, how will you demonstrate and evaluate the extent to which the goals have been met? Achievable, this refers to stretched and challenging goals within ability to achieve outcome. What is the action-oriented verb? Relevant, how does the goal tie into your key responsibilities? How is it aligned to objectives? And for T, time-bound, it is set one or more target dates. The by when to guide your goal to successfully the timely completion include deadlines, dates, and frequency. Here are some of the examples of SMART objectives. By the end of the reading lesson, the students will be able to identify the rising action, climax, and falling actions on a plot diagram. The students will be able to apply their knowledge of the writing processes to a peer editing session in which they provide at least 5 peers with valid feedback. At the end of a Pythagorean theorem, students will be able to correctly solve at least 8 out of 10 geometry problems using the theorem. What then now is smarter objective settings? Is it different from SMART? Let us see. Setting goals for curriculum and lesson is a vital instrument that enables a teaching learning process to stay on a clear long-term direction by defining concrete objectives for achieving and monitoring progress toward specific goals. It also helps the learners learn more and efficiently accomplish their tasks by providing them with some very satisfying challenges that will facilitate them in their skills attainment. For SMARTER, is an acronym stands for specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely, which is same as SMART, then added by E and R, which means evaluate and reward. So let us now see the elements of the SMART and SMARTER objective. So indeed, you can see the words that are synonymous to the term specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-bound. For the specific, you may use the term significant, stretching, simple. For measurable, can be meaningful, motivational, manageable. Attainable, can be appropriate, achievable, agreed, assignable. Relevant, realistic, resource, rewarding. And time-bound, it can be timely, time-specific, and trackable. How about evaluation and review? For the evaluation, this is the extension of the SMART, wherein there should always be an assessment that should take place when it comes to um, taking into consideration the functions done by the SMART. Was it able to do its job, its purpose? So that's why there is what we call evaluation. So in order for you to make an smarter objective, there should always be an incorporated assessment in the end. And of course, assessment will have a result, and that result has to be reviewed. So that's why we have here this step review. The result of the assessment will give you the decision whether there is a need to redefine the objective set in the lesson. Since we are writing learning outcomes in a certain lesson, we have to take into consider the three domains of learning. You have been encountering this term from time to time, but let us see the importance of these three terms in the assessment. We have the cognitive, affective, and psychomotor, or these called CAP, CAP. In an ordinary classroom, a teacher usually writes a lesson plan. The lesson contains an objective, and the objective should be stated in terms of CAP, cognitive, affective, and psychomotor. It should be attained, and in order for you to determine whether it has been attained, of course, it should be evaluated and reviewed. Let's take the first one, the cognitive. Cognitive defines intellectual skills or knowledge. This is how we will able to determine whether the students are really making mental processes of what they have, mental processing of what they have learned. And then on the affective, the second one, it refers to the development in feelings or expressive areas or attitude or self. So this is something like assessment as learning, wherein they have to realize all the things that they have learned in a particular lesson. So this is where the teacher should see whether the learned concept has been internalized. And for the psychomotor, this is the manifestation of the cognitive and the affective. It is manual or physical skills, the competencies, which is the third one. These are the three identified educational activities in the three domains of learning according to Bloom. Let us define cognitive domain. This involves remembering or recognizing necessary information, organizational patterns, and principles that help in the event of mental skills. This is a classification of system of learning habits that can be understood as the aims of the learning processes. The learner should have gained novel abilities, expertise, and attitudes during the teaching and learning period. The cognitive domain includes the development of consciousness and intellectual capacity that is according to Bloom. This involves remembering or recognizing necessary information, organizational patterns, and principles that help in the event of mental skills. So cognitive domain is always associated to mental skills. So there are 6 main groups of processes involving in the cognitive domain, beginning from the easiest to the most complex. And they are remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. So this time, as a teacher, you will be able to identify what kind of or what level of the cognitive domain you are writing in your lesson plan and what particular learning objectives under the cognitive domain, especially the level that you are trying your learners to attain. It is very important for a teacher to identify what level of the cognitive domain that the teacher is trying to let the students attain, because this is very significant in unpacking of the learning competencies. Before a teacher can create or write an objective in a particular lesson, of course, the level, the teacher should determine what level it's into. So for the remembering, it recalls or retrieve previously learned information. You are just requiring your students to recall or retrieve previously learned information. The keywords or the verbs that you may use for this level, examples are describes, defines, identifies, knows, labels, lists, matches, names, outlines, recalls, recognizes, reproduces, selects, states. Those are the verbs that you may use in the remembering level. And higher to that is the understanding level, which you are requiring your learners to comprehend the meaning, interpolate, translate, and interpret teachings and problems. Or you may also require your students to state a particular problem in one's words. One best example of this is at the end of the lesson, a student can rewrite the principles of test writing. Rewriting is a manifestation of understanding. And other keywords that you may use here are comprehends, converts, defends, distinguishes, estimates, explains, extends, generalizes, gives an example, infers, interprets, paraphrases, predicts, rewrites, summarizes, translates. Higher to understanding is the applying. Under this level, you are requiring your learners to utilize a concept in a situation or unprompted utilization of an abstraction. Or it simply means applies what has learned or what was learned in the school into original life situation. And the keywords that you may identify under the applying level, of course, applies, changes, computes, constructs, demonstrates, discovers, manipulates, modifies, operates, predicts, prepares, produces, relates, shows, solves, uses. Next to that level, higher to that, is what we call analyzing level. Here, you are requiring your students to split materials or concepts into parts so that its structure may be understood. You may also require your students to differentiate facts and inferences. Keywords that you can use here when writing an outcomes under the analyzing level is what here: breakdowns, compares, contrasts, diagrams, deconstructs, differentiates, discriminates, distinguishes, identifies, illustrates, infers, outlines, relates, selects, and separates, and many more. Higher to analyzing level is the evaluating level. Here, you are requiring your students to style judgments about the value of ideas or materials. The keywords that you may use here is appraises, compares, concludes, contrasts, criticizes, critiques, defends, describes, discriminates, evaluates, explains, interprets, justifies, relates, summarizes, supports. And the highest level is the creating level, wherein you are requiring your students to build a structure or design from varied elements, or you are trying to require your learners to produce something unique or original. Example of the keywords under the level you may identify is categorize, combines, compiles, composes, creates, devises, designs, explains, generates, modifies, organizes, plans, rearranges, reconstructs, relates, reorganizes, revises, rewrites, summarizes, tells, writes, etc., etc. For clarification, the original domain under the cognitive level, the terms are expressed in terms of nouns and later changed by the student of Bloom, whose name is Lorien Anderson. It turned out to be interchanging the last two highest level, the creating and evaluation. And the form of the word now is in verb. And it is also categorized into higher order thinking skills and lower order thinking skills. The first three, remembering, understanding, applying, is under the lower order thinking skills, and while the last, analyzing, evaluating, creating, is on the higher order thinking skills. You can see here in the example of the application of the levels from remembering up to creating. The topic is all about global warming. Under the remembering, if you require your students to just define global warming, that is only remembering. And then if you require your students to think deeply, why does global warming occur? That is under the understanding level. And if you ask your students the question about what will happen if global temperatures continue to rise, that is applying. And then on the analyzing level, you can see the transition of the questioning technique. It turned out to be um, relating it into a more complicated situation. Let's say, how can governments help to reduce the impacts of global warming? And if you require your students to answer the question, has the automobile industry successful in reducing dioxide emissions? That is on the evaluating level. And for the creating, can I come up with ways to reduce the impacts of global warming? So that is the most complicated task. You can also give your own example in your major field of specialization. Let's proceed to another type of domain under the CAP, which is the psychomotor domain. The psychomotor domain includes coordination, physical movement, and use of motor skills. Enhancing these skills requires practice and is measured in speed, precision, and distance. Let us now classify the levels of psychomotor domain given by Clark in the year 2012. So the order will start from the lowest, which is all about perception, up to the highest, which is all about origination. So there are 7 major categories which are enumerated from most straightforward behavior to the most complex. The first one is perception or awareness. It is the ability to use sensory feedback to control the action of the motor. This ranges from sensory stimulation to translation through cue selection. An example of this is one notices nonverbal communication indications. Another one is estimating where a stone will land after it is thrown and then moving to the correct location to catch the stone. Another example is adjust the heat of the oven to correct temperature by smell and taste of food. The keywords that you may use here are selects, labels, notices, distinguishes, decides, classifies, separates, tells, picks. Higher to that is the set. Set refers to readiness to performance. It contains mental, physical, and expressive sets. These 3 sets are characters that predetermine a person's response to different scenarios, sometimes called mindsets. An example to this situation is tells and acts upon a sequence of steps in a work process, distinguish one's abilities and boundaries, shows yearning to learn a new method. The keywords that you may use here when writing a psychomotor learning objective are starts, displays, describes, transfers, proceeds, answers, displays, positions, volunteers. Higher to set is what we call guided response. This refers to the initial stages in learning a multifaceted skill that includes imitation and trial and error. It is also referred to as the adequacy of performance is achieved by practicing. An example is a student performs a mathematical equation as demonstrated. Another one is following instructions to build a model. Or you may say response hand signal of the instructor while learning to operate a machine. The keywords that you may use here are duplicates, hints, tracks, react, replicate, response. The next level is what we call mechanism or basic proficiency. This is the transitional stage in learning a complex skill. Learned responses have become usual, and the movements can be performed with some assurance and proficiency. For example, repair a personal computer, fix a leaking faucet, drive a car. And the keywords you may use are assembles, calibrates, constructs, dismantles, presents, attach, fixes, grinds, heats, manipulates, measures, repairs, mixes, organizes, sketches. Higher to mechanism is what we call complex overt response, or also known as expert. The skilled performance of motor acts that involve intricate movement patterns. Expertise is indicated by a quick, accurate, and highly coordinated performance. This category includes performing without hesitation. Example, driving a car into a tight parallel parking spot, manipulating a computer quickly and accurately, displaying competence while playing the piano. Those examples are really skilled. The keywords are assembles, fixes, grinds, heats, manipulates, measures, mends, mixtures, organize, drafts. Higher to that is adaptation. Skills are well established, and the individual can adjust movement patterns to fit unique requirements. An example to this is one can answer effectively to unexpected experiences. Another one is changes instruction to meet the needs of the learners.
or do a task with a machine that is not originally intended to do. So those are adaptations. The keywords are adapts, alters, changes, rearranges, reorganizes, revises, varies. And the highest among the levels is what we call origination. This is creating new patterns of movement to fit a specific situation or problem. Learning outcomes emphasize creativity based on highly developed skills. An example to this is constructs a new theory, develops signals, original signals and complete training programming, generates a new exercise routine. So that is something original. So under the cognitive domain, this is equivalent to creating. Let us now proceed to the psychomotor domain levels as conceptualized by Dave 1975. So this is a lot earlier than the previous. And the levels are imitation, manipulation, precision, articulation, and naturalization. In imitation, it refers to seeing and modeling behavior after someone else performed, or someone else performed may be of low quality. Example, copying a work of art and performing a skill while observing a demonstrator. So that is imitation by nature. The next one is higher to imitation is manipulation. This is being able to take specific actions by recall or following instructions. One best example to this is students being able to complete a skill on one's own after taking lessons or reading about it, or following instructions to create a model. Manipulation. The third one, higher to that, is precision. It refers to refining or becoming more accurate. This is acting a skill within a degree of exactness. A situational example is working and reworking something so that it will be just perfect, or perform a skill or task without assistance, or demonstrating a job as a beginner. So that is under precision. But there is something higher to that, which is also known as articulation. It refers to organizing and familiarizing a series of actions to achieve harmony and internal uniformity. Harmony and internal uniformity. Example, joining a series of skills to produce a presentation that involves, let's say, music, drama, color, sounds, etc. And combining a set of skills or activities to meet the role play requirement. So that is articulation. And the highest among the levels in this psychomotor domain, conceptualized by Dave, is what we call naturalization. Naturalization refers to learning a higher level performance until it becomes natural, or without needing to reflect much about it. Example, steer a vehicle into a tight parallel parking spot, or operates a computer quickly and accurately. Or you may say, display ability while playing the piano. Or let's say LeBron James is playing basketball or Tiger Woods hitting a golf ball. So that is naturalization. Another levels of psychomotor domain as conceptualized by Harrow, which is earlier than the previous and was discovered 1972. These are reflex movements, fundamental movements, perceptual abilities, physical abilities, skilled movements, and non-discursive communication. Reflex movements is considered to be lowest, and the highest is non-discursive communication. Let us take it one by one. For the reflex movements, responses that are not learned, such as an involuntary reaction. Example to this is the automatic response. Or you may say you reply or you respond immediately. Reflex movement. While for the fundamental movements, These are what we call elementary movements, such as walking or grasping. For the perceptual abilities, this is the response to provocations such as visual, auditory, kinesthetic, or tactile discrimination. An example to this is trailing a moving object or recognizing a pattern. Perceptual abilities. Higher to that is what we call physical abilities or fitness. This is what we call stamina must be developed for further development such as strength and agility. Example to this is gain strength or run a marathon, something like that. And higher to that is skilled movements, which is referring to advanced learned movements as one would find it in sports or acting, skilled movement. Example, using a progressive series of integrated movements. Perform a role in a stage play or play in a set of sequence in a sport game. And the highest among is the non-discursive communication, or this is the useful body languages or the use of useful body languages such as motions and facial expressions. One can express himself or herself by using actions and gestures. So that is non-discursive communication. So as you can see, there are three levels of psychomotor domain, but conceptualized differently by different people. But still, one common to those differences is the levels. There is what we call the lowest level and the highest level. Let us now proceed to the last domain, which is all about the affective domain. In Bloom's taxonomy, the affective domain is one of the three domains, and the other are the psychomotor and cognitive. The affective domain contains how we deal with things expressively, such as feelings, values, appreciation, enthusiasm, motivations, and attitudes. The five major classes are listed from the most straightforward behavior to the most complex. And what are those? According to Clark, here are the levels of the affective domain. The lowest level is receiving, and the highest is characterization by value set. In receiving, it refers to alertness, willingness to learn, selected attention. Example of the situation is learners listen to others with esteem. Or shall I say, students listen for and recall the names of newly introduced people. The keywords that you may use here when writing an objective you may use acknowledge as attentive, courteous, dutiful, follows, gives, listens, understands. Higher to that level is what we call responding or response to phenomena. This refers to active participation by the learners. Wait and react to a particular phenomenon is another situation. It also refers to learning outcomes that may underscore compliance in response, willingness to meet, or satisfaction in responding. Example of this situation is contributes to class discussion, gives demonstration, or distinguish the safety rules and practices. The keywords that you may use here in writing a learning objective are responds, supports, aids, conforms, follows, discusses, greets, helps, labels, performs, presents, illustrates, and tells. Next higher level is valuing. Valuing is created on the internalization of a set of specified values. Evidences to these values are expressed in the learner's explicit behavior. An example to this is one can prove trust in the democratic process. One is prone to differences between individuals and cultures, diversity in values. Another manifestation of this is shows problem solving capability, proposes and follow-ups with a dedication to a program for social change. Another example, informs the management of issues one feels about. So if you are going to try writing learning objectives in the valuing domain under the cognitive level, you may use appreciates, cherishes, treasure, demonstrates, initiates, invites, joins, justifies, proposes, respect, shares. Higher level to valuing is what we call organization. Organization, it refers to organize morals into priorities by contrasting different values, resolving conflicts between them, creating a unique value system. An example to this is accept the standards of professional ethics, explain the role of systematic planning in problem solving, creates a life plan in harmony with your abilities, your interests, and your beliefs, or prioritize time efficiently to meet the needs of organization, the family, and the self. So if you're going to write an outcome or an objective under the organization level, you may use the words associates, relates, synthesizes. The last one is characterization by value set. This refers to a system of value that controls the behavior. The behavior is the learner's omnipresent, constant, predictable, and most important characteristic. Instructional goals are connected with general adjustment threads, say personal, social, or emotional. An example to this situation is shows autonomy while working independently, collaborates in group activities, requires an analytical approach when solving problems, or display day-to-day professional adherence to ethical practice. In light of new evidence, review judgment and change behavior. People value what they are for and not how they look. The keywords are acts, discriminates, displays, influences, modifies, performs, qualifies, questions, revises, serves, solves, and verifies. So those are the three learning domains. If you have some questions, you may send me a personal message about the levels and how it will be used in writing learning outcomes for a particular lesson. Thank you.